Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara on this beautiful summer morning. Welcome to all of you here in our physical sanctuary, to all of you in the wider circle joining us online. And I want to give a special shout out to all of our students and teachers who went back to school this week. We are glad you're here. Woo! We at the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara are a community that leads with love, striving to live our lives with integrity, to nurture wonder, and inspire actions that will transform us and hopefully transform the world. Wherever you are on your journey, whether you've come for hope or inspiration, for strength or comfort, for meaning or community or all of the above, we are glad you tuned into this service or passed through these doors today. All people of goodwill are welcome here. My name is Charla Brigante, and I am the Director of Lifespan Religious Exploration around here, and this morning I get to be your worship host. Our minister, the Reverend Julia Hamilton, is on sabbatical until mid-September, which I am told is just 2 weeks away, so she'll be back soon. And this morning, it is my great pleasure to share the chancel with David Selberg, back here, the CEO of Hospice Santa Barbara, who will be sharing stories from his personal journey in his work with death and dying later on in this morning's service. I'm also joined by congregants Eileen Bunning and Ken Ralph, our music director Matthew Grissett, Heather Levin on piano, Angie Swanson-Kiriakou keeping the Zoom and Facebook humming along, our tech team John Diaz and Alfonso Trejos, and the ushers and coffee volunteers serving us this morning. It truly takes a village to create a worship service, so thank you all for being here. Finally, I'd like to extend a special welcome to any visitors joining us for the first time today, whether you're in person or online. I hope you'll sign our guest book. There's a virtual guest book online, and there's a guest book out at the visitor table, the welcome table in our garden after the service. This way we can keep in touch with you and let you know what's going on here, not only on Sundays, but all week long. And there's a lot going on here. I actually had to cut an announcement or two because there's a lot going on. So you can look in your order of service for all the announcements, but let me highlight a few. If you have ever wondered what happens at General Assembly, or if you're wondering what the heck General Assembly even is, don't miss this mini town hall meeting this morning in Parish Hall right after the service, and you're going to learn a lot about this annual gathering of Unitarian Universalists from around the country, and I'm told there will be snacks. And today is the last day to sign up for Connection Circles. Connection Circles, if you've never been in one, offer the opportunity to practice the skills of deep sharing and deep listening, and in so doing, to share meaningfully with a small group over a period of 5 months. Friendship and community are built as a result of the trust that develops in this nurturing environment. You can find out more and sign up at the table in the garden after the service. Look for Carol Schwitzer. Carol, you want to wave? Are you here somewhere? There's Carol. And there's also a link in the Friday email for those of you online. Also today, there's a lot this morning. Our Get Out the Vote postcard, what do I call you, Janice? Our postcard maven, leader, Get Out the Vote postcard person, Janice Connolly, has some packets of postcards that she'll be signing out in the garden today after the service as well. So take a packet, write a bunch of postcards, and help get out the vote. And finally, last one. I just want you to mark your calendars for Saturday, October 19th for our Surfin' Safari annual auction. And check your Friday email for information about how you might help bring this beloved annual event to life. All right, now I invite you to take a breath. Settle and ground your body comfortably in this space. Maybe put both feet on the floor and close your eyes. Allow yourself to arrive fully in this space, in this community, in this shared hour together, as we let the sound of our bowl gong connect us.
Our chalice lighting words this morning are a mishmash of a whole bunch of chalice lighting words that I've read over the years. And we quite often will, as members of the worship team, will cobble together chalice lighting words that seem appropriate. So this is what I came up with this morning. Seasons change, passion fades, journeys end. A flame that now burns so brightly may be extinguished by a sudden gust of wind or so slowly fade as its fuel is consumed. And yet, in our all too human journey, we're called upon to light a flame anew, to fall in love again, to begin a great adventure, to ease each other's pain. We kindle our chalice this morning in full knowledge that it may not stay lit forever, but also knowing that we have within us the fire that can reignite this flame again and again and again.
Every week, we like to hold up one good thing that happened in our world over the past week. And I can think of a bunch of good things that I might share, but one rises to the top above all the others for me right now. I would like to hold up as our collective good thing this morning the nomination of a Black and South Asian woman as the candidate for President of the United States by a major political party. I'm not going to say which party, but so regardless of your political affiliation, can we shout a hallelujah for that, for this historic moment? Hallelujah. Thank you.
Rise and body your spirit as we sing our opening hymn, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. We will start it together, and then I'll cue you so we can do it as a round. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of living, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come, come, whoever you are. Come, come, whoever you are.
It is that time in the service for a story for all ages, but I especially want to invite any kids who might be here to come on up, sit on the rug. I see some kids back there. Sit on the rug and hear a good story. Here comes Dylan leading the way. Thank you, Dylan. I see Sophia coming up. Come on up. Welcome, everyone. Have a seat. Great. So this is a story about a cat named Barney. When Barney died, everyone was really sad. Whenever a cat dies, or a dog, or anyone we love, it can be a little bit like this story about Barney. Since dying is as usual as living, it's good to know about him. So here's our story. My cat Barney died last Friday. I was very sad. I cried and I didn't watch television. I cried and I didn't eat my chicken or even my chocolate pudding. I went to bed and I cried. My mother sat down on my bed and she gave me a hug. She said we could have a funeral for Barney in the morning. She said I should think of 10 good things about Barney so I could tell them at the funeral. I thought and I thought and I thought of good things about Barney. I thought of 9 good things, and then I fell asleep. In the morning, my mother wrapped Barney in a yellow scarf. My father buried Barney in the ground by a tree in the yard. Annie, my friend from next door, came over with flowers. And I told good things about Barney. Barney was brave, I said, and smart and funny and clean, also cuddly and handsome, and he only once ate a bird. It was sweet, I said, to hear him purr in my ear. And sometimes he slept on my belly and kept it warm. Those are all good things, said my mother, but I just count 9. I said I would try to think of another one later. At the end of the funeral, we sang a song for Barney. We couldn't remember any cat songs, so we sang one about a pussy willow. Even my father knew the words. Then Annie and I went into the kitchen with Mother. She gave us orangeade and butter cookies, and she left the box on the table so we could have seconds. I gave my seconds to Annie. I miss Barney, I said. Annie said Barney was in heaven with lots of cats and angels, drinking cream and eating cans of tuna. I said Barney was in the ground. Heaven, said Annie, heaven. So there. The ground, I told her, the ground. You don't know anything. My father came in from the yard and took a cookie. Big-mouthed Annie said heaven again. I said ground. Tell her who's right, I asked Father. She doesn't know anything. Maybe Barney's in heaven, my father began. Aha, said Annie, and stuck her tongue out at me. And maybe, said my father, Barney isn't. What did I tell you, I said, and yanked Annie's braid. Father made me let go. We don't know too much about heaven, he told Annie. We can't be absolutely sure that it's there. But if it is there, said Annie in her absolutely sure voice, it's bound to have room for Barney and tuna and cream. She finished another cookie and went back home. My father told me he had to work in the garden. I said that I would help, but only a little. I told him I didn't like it that Barney was dead. He said, why should I like it? It's sad, he said. He told me that it might not feel so sad tomorrow. My father had a little packet of brown little seeds, and he shook them some out into his hand. The ground will give them food and a place to live, he said, and soon they'll grow a stem and some leaves and flowers. I squeezed the packet open and looked down to the bottom. I told him, I don't see any leaves and I don't see any flowers. Things change in the ground, said my father. In the ground, everything changes. Will Barney change too? I asked. Oh yes, said my father. He'll change until he's part of the ground in the garden. And then I asked, will he help to make flowers and leaves? He will, said my father. He'll help grow the flowers and he'll help grow the tree and some grass. You know, he said, that's a pretty nice job for a cat. My father and I planted all of the seeds in the garden. Mother made sandwiches and we ate them under the tree. After lunch, we worked in the garden some more. At night, I still didn't want to watch any television. When I turned out the light, my mother sat down on my bed. She gave me a hug, and I said I had something to tell her. Listen, I said, and I told the good things about Barney. Barney was brave, I said, and smart and funny and clean, also cuddly and handsome, and he only once ate a bird. It was sweet, I said, to hear him purr in my ear, and sometimes he slept on my belly and kept it warm. Those are all good things, said my mother, but I still just count 9. Yes, I said, but now I have another. Barney is in the ground and he's helping grow flowers. You know, I said, that's a pretty nice job for a cat. And that's our time for all ages today. And you all can take the book if you want to look at it with Janie.
We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go. To nurture the spark of your precious life. We hold you in our love as you go.
Good morning. I'm Eileen Bunning, and I've been here as a member for over 10 years. Hard to believe that, but, and thank you, Charlotte, for that wonderful, wonderful children's book. I'm going to be 80 in 2 weeks. Hard to believe, but when I was young and a child, death was not discussed in my house. And it was kind of a mystery, and it's hard. And so thank you for welcoming the word death into our service today. I've been a member here proudly, and I think that some of you may know me from classes that we have held on aging, completing advanced care directives, and what we might anticipate towards the end of our lives. Yeah, I'm known as the Death Lady, and the Death Guy is coming soon. Today I have been asked to share with you a bit of my journey as a registered nurse and what led me to be here in Santa Barbara and now the retired CEO of VNA and Hospice. I'm honored to have become a part of this compassionate community of organizations with smart people that provide some of the best care I know of to the recipients of end-of-life support and hospice care. I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't have to walk this path by yourself. I graduated nursing school in the early 60s, Yeah, that's a long time ago. It was I trained at a state-of-the-art New York City medical school, but at that time, we never heard of end-of-life care and hospice. We didn't have patients dying. Ha. As nurses, we were trained to bring hope to the patient and trust for the physicians. The medical system was very patriarchal back then, and I know there are some other nurses in the audience that could relate to this. We were never to share with the patient or family what their diagnosis was, and we were never, ever to be able to whisper, your husband might be passing away or dying. That was not our responsibility. The physician knew what was best. These patients were often taken to the end of the ward to be in a quiet room, which unfortunately often became isolation. Pain medication was given every 4 hours, never before that, and never in spite of the level of pain. After all, we didn't want to create an addict, you know. Dying patients, okay. Crazy attitudes, but we thought we were doing a good thing. In the mid-60s, I was now a licensed registered nurse and often in charge of my own ward. As fate would have it, my father-in-law was diagnosed with cancer at a rather young age. This once jolly and happy spirit that was beloved by everyone became withdrawn, very sad, and sometimes really angry. We knew he knew, and he knew we knew, but we never could talk about the big it in the room. I knew in my heart this was not caring or supportive or compassionate, but it was not my place to violate the rules. These practices were not intentionally cruel. This was just how the culture of the medical system functioned. Until 1967, when Cicely Saunders, a social worker and a nurse at St. Christopher's in London, founded the first modern hospice. She saw the patient not as just a physical body to be fixed, but she saw the patient and articulated the theory of hospice as a new strategy to address the alleviation of physical pain. That's not just drop, 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 but what is your pain? I honor it, let's manage it for you. As well as the spiritual, psychological, and social suffering that anyone may be experiencing. She also is credited with initiating the working of teams of physicians, nurses, social workers, and non-denominational chaplains, along with really well-trained volunteers. We're moving away from just a physical body to an integrated, complex human being. Then, great joy, right here in America, Dr. Kubler-Ross published her book on death and dying in 1969. And the subtitle to that was something that really shifted my thinking. What will the dying have to teach us? Following these two women came multiple numbers of physicians who began writing and supporting this new perspective of care. The medical culture was finally shifting. For me, it was the acknowledgement of what was always in my heart, the human right to be treated with dignity and compassion. I was now encouraged to practice again and follow how I was meant to be with our patients and families. At the same time, I also completed a degree in healthcare administration, and I studied and completed a master's in psychology with a focus of my thesis being death and dying. While I once left nursing, I soon returned and to work in the hospice in Sonoma County, just as the AIDS pandemic was being acknowledged. It was the hardest of times, but it renewed my heart and spirit to be working with our teams, to have the patient and families teach us what they needed. It renewed my trust in the compassion of medicine. I have cared for my dying mother, my father, and my former husband here at our home, John. I felt blessed to learn from these intimate experiences. I once read while compiling my thesis, and I quote, "You can judge the caring of a culture by the way they treat their dying." I am so privileged to have been recruited here and to have had the honor to work with some of the best people across the fabulous stretch of services that have been cultivated here in Santa Barbara. I recall once being at a lecture from a visiting physician who was working in San Francisco, remarking that we should be very proud, Santa Barbara. You have developed one of the blessed places in the country to die. And yes, sadly, we will all die at some time. Do remember, it is your right to be cared for with compassion and dignity. Thank you.
Well, good morning again. My name is Ken. I've been a member of this congregation for 25 years. And I got to say, and I've been a member of the worship team for almost half of that. And it's always an honor for me to get up here and share my stories with you. And I just want to tell you that this one, this morning, was probably one of the most challenging stories that I've ever had to come up with in all that time. Trust me, it's not because it's too much. It's not because I want to bum you out or anything, nothing like that. It's a beautiful day. It's a lovely story. And it's titled, My Ticket to Heaven. All right. Well, first of all, I want to say that I don't know a whole lot about hospice. And in fact, I don't know a whole lot about death, for that matter. I've only had one experience of witnessing the death of somebody really dear to me. And that was my dad. And it was actually a really lovely moment that I want to share. His death was no surprise. He had been struggling with prostate cancer for several years until it finally got him. He was relatively young, only 74 years old, 1 year older than I am right now, which gives me pause. But he was lucky to spend the last couple of weeks of his life at home, in his own bed, with his family around him. I would like to go that way myself. And he had the wonderful care of a hospice nurse throughout that entire last couple of weeks, who was there with us through the whole thing. And I wish I could remember her name, but darn it, that was like 26 years ago, and I just can't remember. So, well, over those 2 weeks, I spent a lot of time by my dad's side in that bedroom. And my dad never was much of a talker to begin with, unless you got a couple of shots of whiskey in him or something. Now he was sort of in a morphine haze. So my time sitting beside him, beside his bed, was generally pretty darn quiet. He didn't have much to contribute. So I found myself actually talking more to the hospice nurse on the other side of the bed. And we learned a lot about each other. I learned she was a Christian, and a very devout Christian, as a matter of fact, and that she had a family. And anyway, I learned a lot about her. We shared our own stories with each other, which really helped make the time go by. And I also helped her often with various tasks that you have to do, like changing the sheets or any number of things. And she witnessed pretty much everything that went on at that bedside. She was my witness, and I was really happy to have it. Well, she also witnessed the time that our neighbor, or my dad's neighbor, I should say, 20 years they lived next door to each other. His name was Norm. He was a Catholic. He had a large family. He had 8 kids that we grew up with, actually. And he came over to visit Dad. My dad's name was Cal, which is also my name, as a matter of fact. Anyway, he just wanted to talk to my dad, and at the end of his conversation, out of his pocket, he pulled the little booklet out, like a pamphlet thing from his church. And it was all about how, you could be saved by, letting Jesus into your life. And the title on this little booklet was Your Ticket to Heaven. And before he left, Norm just took the ticket, said, Cal, I'm going to put your ticket right here on the nightstand. I'll leave it with you. And then he left. Well, my dad was absolutely not religious in the least. We had no religious upbringing when I grew up. And so I kind of rolled my eyes. I looked over at the hospice nurse, and she is just beaming. This is a great thing. He's got a ticket to heaven. And I thought, well, this is going in the pile with all the, the pamphlets from, Seventh-day Adventist or whatever, and we'd never see it again. Well, a couple days later, when I arrived to my dad's bedside, the first thing he did was reach over, grab my arm, and he says, "Do you still have that ticket?" And what? The ticket? That he remembered this. And I looked again at the hospice nurse, and now she's really beaming and smiling. And so I took the ticket off the nightstand, put it in his hand. He just held it to his chest for the whole time I was there. I tell you, this process of dying is so mysterious to me as to what comes up. Well, it wasn't long before my dad cashed in that ticket. Right? He was having a hard time a couple days later, and the nurse had upped the morphine to ease his pain. And once he was comfortable, we decided this would be a good chance to change his bed sheets. And there's a method to changing bed sheets that anybody who's probably done nursing knows about this. And that is that you grab the individual by the shoulders and roll them over, like towards me. This is what I did with my dad. I rolled him over towards me while she kind of rolled up the sheet behind him, and then you roll the person back and whip the sheet out from underneath them. So I had my dad by the shoulders, and I was rolling him over like this, and I saw him grimace a little. And then I looked down, and the light had gone out. He had died right there in my arms. I'm this far away from him. And I didn't know what to do. Like I was just paralyzed. What am I going to do? This is my family. We don't have much access to our emotions. What we want to know is, what can I do? It's sort of like Michelle Obama, do something. right? That was sort of our motto. But I didn't know what to do. And then I looked across the bed at the hospice worker, and she was crying. And I thought, of course. And the tears just began to pour down as I laid my dad back down on the pillow. And I swear, to this day, I thank that hospice nurse for that gift that she gave me in that moment. And I'll always think of hospice that way.
Thank you, Eileen and Ken, for your moving reflections. Each month at the Unitarian Society, we share a portion of our offering with a group or organization living out our values in the world. Our outreach offering recipients for August support our local LGBTQ+ community, Pacific Pride Foundation, PFLAG Santa Barbara, and the Santa Barbara Transgender Advocacy Network, or SBTAN. All of these folks, including us, the Unitarian Society, were at the Pride Festival yesterday. You can find out more about all of these organizations in your order of service. And now if you would join me in the affirmation of gratitude and giving, which is in your service, order of service. Let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for those who share their gifts with us, for we are enriched by their giving. And let us be grateful even for our needs, so that we may learn from the generosity of others.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm David Selberg, and it's truly an honor to be here. I've not quite done something like this before. I usually talk about the work I do and keep it focused on the work. But I'm going to be a little bit more self-disclosing today and talk about my experience through the work I've done. I've been working in nonprofits for 35 years, and I can tell you that it started, quite frankly, right here, 35 years ago. I started my work as a volunteer for an AIDS organization that is now called Pacific Pride Foundation. But back 35 years ago in 1988, 89, it was called the AIDS Counseling and Assistance Program in the Gay and Lesbian Resource Center. Very long name. Again, now it's Pacific Pride Foundation. And our volunteer training was in two places here at Unitarian. It was in the auditorium, and it was in the Blake Lounge next door upstairs. That's where I started my work. And I was 28 years old, and I signed up to be a volunteer AIDS buddy. And AIDS buddies helped folks with HIV/AIDS through their final journey. When you got an AIDS diagnosis back then, you had about 6 months to 18 months at an AIDS diagnosis, and then you died. There was very little treatment back then. So, I grew up in Santa Barbara, born and raised. I never moved away. I grew up in going to public schools. I was raised by my mother. She had 6 boys. I was the youngest and arguably the best looking of them. And she died rather suddenly, unexpectedly when I was 10 years old. And I had guardianship of my person passed around with some of my relatives, the state of California, until I turned 18. And my mom was a very strict Catholic, and took us to church every Sunday, and there was rules, and there was right, and there was wrong. And those rules then for me helped me a lot in my journey through my work. Though I'm not a practicing Catholic now, I do honor and appreciate those early years of my life and my mom's structure and her mothering, basically. So I met in the trainings that happened right here some 35 years ago, I met 2 people that would become my chosen family. One was Gail Rink. Gail Rink was a hospice social worker, and the other one was Joanne Talbot. And Joanne Talbot was the nurse case manager for AIDS CAP, the little AIDS organization I was volunteering for. And Joanne was the only nurse for the entire county of Santa Barbara, which was truly remarkable. So these 2 women became my teachers, my mentors, and later my chosen family. I had no idea in 1988 that I would be working for that AIDS organization, that Gay and Lesbian Resource Center AIDS organization, for 21 years. I worked at Pacific Pride and its precursor organizations for 21 years. I had no idea when I was doing the volunteer training that would be happening. Back in that era, to pull us out a little bit, back in the era of the 1980s and early 1990s, the AIDS epidemic was all about stigma and isolation. Think about these facts. The HIV test that told you were HIV positive, that wasn't really invented until 1985. That's when the HIV test started it was approved by the FDA in 1985. The AIDS epidemic had started in about 1980. It was very much an unspoken, hidden disease, and not just nationally and beyond, but right here in Santa Barbara. Things like the slogan, "Silence equals death," was truly the norm. And so people like Andy Warhol and Keith Haring, some of our creatives in our country, really latched on to silence equals death, and it became very much a movement. ACT UP was an activist organization. I became a member of ACT UP and would do protests down in Los Angeles in front of pharmaceutical companies. We'd have fake blood. We'd throw fake blood. I was a bit of an activist. I had hair back then. And in those late 80s, early 90s, such things as the President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, hadn't even uttered the words until the last year of his 8 years in office. So it was truly silence equals death. A little boy named Ryan White, who was horribly discriminated against, had AIDS in Florida. And he died at the age of 18, and his family, his mother, and he was thrown out of schools because he had AIDS. They were evicted from where they were renting because he had AIDS. It was a horrible time. When he died, post the Reagan administration, the Ryan White Care Act became passed by the Bush administration and the Democratic Congress. And this was a super fund that funded all the states with AIDS dollars, case management, health care. And Santa Barbara in California was one of 3 demonstration sites for those AIDS dollars that came out of the Ryan White Care Act. And our little AIDS cap, GLRC, as we were called, was one of those demonstration projects. So I'm giving you sort of a picture of what it all looked like back then. If you opened up a People magazine back then, you'd hear about AIDS in the late 80s, 90s. You'd see faces of Freddie Mercury with AIDS, Rock Hudson, Liberace, Arthur Ashe, Anthony Perkins, Keith Haring, and so on. The worst years of AIDS deaths in our country, in the United States, reached an apex, interestingly enough, in 1995. Those were the highest death rates of AIDS. This was pre-AIDS cocktails. And when I started working at AIDS Cap, GLRC, we had to literally sign up every week for funerals right here in Little Santa Barbara, because our AIDS patients oftentimes didn't have any family or relatives that were any longer in their lives. It was very much a stigma, and so many of our patients in our AIDS program, those who attended to their funerals, their bodies, were those of us that were volunteers and AIDS workers at the time. Those most hit by AIDS in those years were racial and ethnic minorities, gay and bisexual men, IV drug users. And it was estimated that it was about 50,000 people a year in the United States that died of AIDS, and many millions more, 40 million across the globe. So it was definitely an epidemic to a pandemic. I recall after I started working in AIDS at the AIDS Cap GLRC, that I was given an award from a local business association. I had worked for about 4 years in AIDS, and I recall it was a business association. They gave me an AIDS award for AIDS service, and I remember giving a speech, and I literally counted how many patients we had served since I was working there, and the number was in the upper 400s during that time. Our staff, we were a small but mighty staff at AIDS Cap. I did programs. We had a nurse, Joanne Talbot. We had a social worker, Jerry. There was about 7 of us on staff serving the county. We also worked closely with the county AIDS clinic. There was a specialty AIDS clinic. Folks like Andy Gersoff, an amazing man, physician. Folks like Steve Hosea, amazing infectious disease doctors, so many of them. And other providers. We were all a team, a community. Gail Rink was part of that community in her hospice work. Deep breath. We started doing AIDS walks. There were 25 years of AIDS walks in this community, and I was honored and blessed to be able to co-coordinate most of them. And we did them right up until just a few years ago. So my world, from doing a volunteer training here and not knowing anyone with AIDS, that changed drastically within 2-3 years. It was mostly everybody I knew had AIDS. And in 1990, I met a young, brilliant man with 2 PhDs. His name was Gabriel. He was Central American, Ivy League school. He grew up in the slums of Guatemala. He and I met each other and at a Christmas party, an AIDS Cap Christmas party, and it was love at first sight, and we were together. He told me on the first date that he was HIV positive, and he said, "Do you want to go on another date?" After we went out on one date, and I said, "Yeah, I'll go out on another date with you." And we were together through his death. We were together 10 years. And so my world was very much immersed in HIV/AIDS. Deep breath. So the lessons that I received, I can't even describe them all. But through those years of the AIDS epidemic, my teachers taught me many lessons. Gail Rink, the social worker at Hospice, she was at VNA Hospice, and then she went to Hospice of Santa Barbara. Joanne Talbot was another teacher of mine. She was both a nurse and a psychotherapist. Steve Hosea, the infectious disease doctor and dear friend to this day, and my friend Lynn Cantley. These names were people that taught me all about death and dying and inform the work I do now today at Hospice of Santa Barbara. Some of those lessons, and I just jotted down a few of them, was the deep idea of a quiet presence, having a quiet presence around both the dying and those grieving the dying. Not having a strong outward presence, but a quiet presence. Oftentimes when people are dying, they'll come and ask really good questions. The people around the person dying ask the questions, "I don't know what to do. How do I help my friend? How do I help the family?" And it's something as simple as, "Hey, can I come over and walk your dog? Do you need anything at the grocery store? Can I clean your kitchen for you?" Just the simple things. Those women and men that were my teachers, Gail, Joanne, Steve, Lynn, and others, they taught us community of AIDS workers to support each other. So we became a very tight-knit group. We had dark humor back then that we would only share with each other because it was pretty much a you-know-what show. It was hard work. And at our events, we would have protesters. If there was an AIDS event, we would have those haters right here in our town. Our gay pride festivals, even sadly presently, there's protesters. We would have to fence in our events. When I worked at AIDS Cap GLRC, we got bomb threats. We got threats to our lives in the mail. This was a part, an expected part of our work. Some of the lessons from all that I continue with that these folks taught me. They taught me the art of asking open-ended questions, which was really quite remarkable. For my leisure time, I volunteered for an AIDS organization down in Los Angeles called LA Shanti. And they were a psychosocial AIDS organization that helped the newly diagnosed throughout Los Angeles get a grip on their diagnosis and on their path forward. And I became a trained volunteer facilitator of their support groups on their intensive weekends that they would have about monthly. And so I'd drive down on a Thursday afternoon after work, take off a Friday, and come back Sunday. And I learned an enormous amount of things from LA Shanti, truly a remarkable organization. I also learned carefully during that time, in choosing carefully who I share my intimate feelings with. Because you only have so much resource when you're doing that kind of work and your life is in that world. And so you kind of learn, okay, I've got to take care of myself here. So I learned who to share my intimacy with. And I learned that, when we volunteer at a homeless shelter or we volunteer at an animal shelter, we're helping folks, right? But what I learned about my AIDS work was it was about my community. Though I didn't have AIDS, I learned that this is my community. This is about me. And so it was a different path of self-care when you're when you're fighting for your cause and it's actually part of you, if that makes any kind of sense. I also learned I wasn't going to share this, and then I was, and then I wasn't. Gail Rink and Joanne Talbot would say, be careful, David. They're both gone and in heaven now. They would say, during that era of AIDS, sometimes people were attracted to it that had they would call them energy vampires, just to put it out there to all of you. They didn't really have a role there. They just wanted to be there, almost to voyeur it. And it wasn't malicious, but it came from a broken place. Joanne and Steve Ozea taught me, and Gail taught me, and they used to warn me. It's like, be careful. I was like, okay, thanks for that point. What I learned from my early childhood experiences, with my mom dying very suddenly, unexpectedly, and I was very close to her. I had no relationship with my father in my life, was that all that experience of my upbringing truly did prepare me for my 20s and my 30s, age-wise, for the AIDS epidemic and growing as a gay man. I got to know, I work at Hospice of Santa Barbara now, and I got to know Hospice during those years. Gail Rink, who had worked there, she had served my husband, Gabrielle, who died of AIDS. And so I got to know Hospice of Santa Barbara. They did a support group called People Who Love People with AIDS. And that was a powerful thing. So let's see, I should wrap up here, but let me. It was truly an honor for me to transition from my LGBT HIV work to Hospice of Santa Barbara. I had worked through lots of the marriage equality movement, the Fair Education Act, so many things, AIDS funding both nationally and statewide. And I thought it was time for me to pass on the torch. And I put in my resume at Hospice of Santa Barbara. I frankly didn't think they'd hire me. There were other people with lots of letters after their name. And lo and behold, they did. So I've been there 10 years at the end of this year, and I'm passionate about it. I know my frailties. I know I can't do the frontline work anymore, but I know I can support the staff and the volunteers that do that frontline work. And that's my role there now, and to lead the organization, of course. And in closing, how I restore myself, and I'm definitely a spiritual person, different from the Catholicism of my upbringing, is I have a deck where I live. My home has a deck with trees around it. And I love to sit out there in the morning with coffee quietly, or wine after work, and think about life, and think about and reflect on all the experiences in my life and what a gift they've all been. And, you know, I often think those that we love, and hearing what Ken was sharing, those that we love, they're alive. Gabrielle's alive, my mom Jane's alive. As long as I remember them, and I'm so grateful to them, they're alive for me. And so many people, so many faces of those that I've been with through their death over the decades. And the idea of service is a spiritual thing to me. That's where my spirituality lies, as well as gratitude. And my favorite movie, in closing, is It's a Wonderful Life. You know, it's like 1936, you know? And when Jimmy Stewart, who keeps trying to get out of his hometown, remember, but he can't quite get out, there's always something that keeps him in, I forget, Bedford Falls or wherever. His dad dies suddenly, and he goes into his dad's office, and behind his dad's desk is a sign. And I love what's on the sign. I remember zooming into it when I saw the movie on an old VHS tape. And what the sign is behind his dad's desk, his dad just died, is all that you can take with you is that which you have given away. And I just love that. Isn't that a beautiful thing? All that you can take with you is that which you have given away. And that to me, if there's a headstone for me, I'll put that on it. Thank you all for listening.
Please rise and body your spirit as we sing our closing hymn, 1009, Meditation on Breathing. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace.
When I breathe out,
I breathe out love.
when I breathe in,
I breathe in
peace. When I breathe out,
I breathe out.
I breathe out When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in,
I breathe in,
I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love.
When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
We get to my post benediction. As we extinguish our chalice and bring our service to a close, may we remember that we are not alone. We gather in this community to nurture, care for, and inspire each other along this journey we call life. All of us need all of us to go the distance. As you go forth into this beautiful and heartbreaking world, may the light of love shine upon you, out from within you, be gracious unto you, and bring you peace. For this is the day we are given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And let us call out a blessing. Come forward.
Call out a blessing, call out a blessing, call